20 years ago, this happened.
Something's gone badly wrong. We really don't know at the moment. There's loud bangs.
We need ambulances and water to King's Cross.
I understand what you're saying.
And Russell Square. Russell Square is priority.
We're going to have it as a major incident, so we'll get ambulances to you wherever I can, okay?
Okay, thanks, mate.
Go down to the home.
Islamist al-Qaeda jihadis blew themselves up on tubes and a bus, killing 52 people and injuring nearly 800 more. Not that you'd know who was responsible, reading the statements from Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Sadiq Khan earlier today. Look, they talked about hate and not giving in to those who wish to divide us. No mention of murderous jihadis there. And this clip from today might stick in the craw a little bit for a lot of people. Sir Keir Starmer represented notorious Islamist hate preacher Abu Qatada and argued that he should not be deported. He, of course, says he was only doing his job, which is true. Sadiq Khan also represented the leader of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, in the early 2000s, attempting to help overturn his ban on coming to Britain. Again, he was just doing his job. Our current Attorney General, Lord Hermer, another man simply just doing his job, also represented a 9/11 mastermind, Mustafa al-Hossawi, who last year pleaded guilty to the murder of 2,900 people in the US attacks. Today, our Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, tweeted the usual guff about the country standing together against hate. Well, she is in charge of our borders, and I revealed on this very show a couple of weeks ago that human traffickers helping people to break into Britain across the Channel are pumping out ISIS propaganda. I worry that terrorists, like the ones who committed the 7/7 attacks, have come across the Channel and are now here in Britain. And that got me thinking, what lessons has Britain learnt since 7/7? Around 850 British citizens travelled to fight for ISIS, and around 40% have returned. Where are they now? We've had several more terrorist attacks. The Fishmongers Hall terrorist, Usman Khan, claimed to be rehabilitated before killing 2 people. Salman Abidi's Libyan family were refugees to Britain. He blew himself up in Manchester Arena, killing 22, including children. We've had a catalogue of other terrorist attacks, including at London Bridge, where one of the attackers, Quram Butt, appeared in a Channel 4 documentary called Jihadi Next Door, in which he unfurled an ISIS flag in Regent's Park in London. He went on to kill a lot of people. A report by the Henry Jackson Society found that 52% of British Muslims want to make it illegal to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, and 32% of British Muslims favour the implementation of Sharia law, and the same number support the declaration of Islam as the national religion. That is, of course, according to the Henry Jackson Society. Most worryingly, extreme views were generally more likely to be found in the youngest age cohort of 18 to 34-year-olds. We've got people calling for blasphemy laws. We've got people out on the streets last weekend as part of a group founded by the sister of a man convicted over grooming gang offences in West Yorkshire, appearing to suggest that reporting on the rape gangs crisis is a bit racist. We also have useful idiots like this wandering the streets.
And then Palestine Action, some representatives will be able to give an oral hearing on Friday to prevent the ascension of their prescription. So watch this space, and as always, I cannot wait for the West to fall.
Cannot wait for the West to fall, they say there. And this bloke in Preston, I believe it was, over the weekend, now I would argue, he may disagree with this, but I would argue that he was being openly anti-Semitic. He talks about a European Jewish problem. Listen closely.
The story is not Hamas. The story is the 77-year colonial era project gone horribly wrong. Our problem, the European problem, was passed on to them. That's what we did. The European problem, the European Jewish problem, where the Europeans, they have been anti-Semitic for hundreds of years.
When you consider all that, have we actually learnt anything from 7/7? Are we in a better or worse position than we were on 7/7. It's all very well and good laying reeds and pulling a sad face and remembering it, but our politicians seem unwilling to actually name the problem, and they have, over the years, certainly not dealt with it. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. We have journalist and broadcaster Carol Malone, another journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, do you feel as though we've learned any lessons? Did it stick in the craw a little bit watching Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Sadiq laying those reeds?
Of course, you know, I've thought a lot about this today. You know, 7/7 has become the forgotten atrocity, not for the victims, obviously, but because it raised horrendous questions about multiculturalism in this country and about Islamic extremism in this country. And unlike 9/11, which was perpetrated by people outside the country, this was perpetrated by people, by Muslims who had grown up in this country, who knew our values, who had grown up among our values, and yet wanted to destroy us. And I just feel like, and I heard some of the victims talking today, some of the survivors saying they didn't feel they were allowed to grieve properly or say what they felt about it because it was Islamists which had committed the atrocity. And until this country reckons with that and deals with that, nothing is ever going to get better. You know, we have people on the left who tried to suggest at the time that this was understandable because it was in response to anti-Muslim sentiment in this country. Tosh. They were trying to say it was because of Britain's involvement in wars in majority Muslim countries. Tosh. This was people who were trying to destroy it. We haven't addressed the problem.
We've not. I would argue we've actually made it worse. And so now, if you look at those statistics which show that the most extreme Islamist groups in Britain are apparently the 18 to 34-year-olds, that's very much a homegrown problem. 850 or so Brits went to fight for ISIS. About 40% of them were allowed back. We've got an open border in the Channel for terrorists to just come and funnel across. We have learnt nothing, Jake, have we? But of course, we've had thoughts and prayers and we lit candles. That's great, isn't it?
So, I think I remember the attacks themselves. I was living in London, actually, at the time, and it was almost like a loss of the age of innocence, I think, here in the UK. I think up until that point, lots of people had bought into the idea that multiculturalism was only a positive thing. I'm not saying it's only a negative thing, but was only a positive thing. And I think since those horrific attacks, which will only seem like 5 minutes away for the people who are working and responding to it or the victims, all political parties, and by that I mean the Labour governments, the coalition governments, the Conservative government, all political parties have not properly addressed the challenges that we have with Islamic extremism in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that now we have the issues with open borders. I think that's got to change.
Yeah, it is. I was going to read out a section of Sir Keir Starmer's statement. By the way, I should also say, I do want to say that from what I've seen from Reform UK and Nigel Farage himself, I haven't seen a mention of Islamist extremism from them either in this. I could be wrong about that, but I haven't seen that, and I know a lot of people are quite surprised by that. But Sir Keir Starmer's statement, Benjamin, those who tried to divide us failed. We stood together then and we stand together now against hate and for the values that define us of freedom, democracy and the rule of law. We have Sharia courts in Britain now.
Well, I mean, everyone remembers where they were when this happened. I can remember vividly. So I think Jake's description, or was it yours, that the end of the age of innocence is definitely true because it's changed everything since. Often when I get on the tube, I still, it crosses your mind. And it's 20 years later and I was 11.
But is that not because we've obviously categorically not dealt with it and, in fact, the problem's got worse?
Well, I mean, the number of plots that get foiled is a couple of years ago, the head of MI5 said there was 31 plots, late-stage plots, so nearly happening plots in 1 year. So the one thing I would say is that the fact that we've had, I think we had the Westminster Bridge attack and the horrendous Ariana Grande attack, the fact that something something just like this London attack hasn't happened again is remarkable and says there are a lot of people doing an incredible job to stop these people. But I do think there is a naivete about the fact that Islam is not the problem, but radical Islam is a problem in this country.
And that's getting worse, isn't it?
And I think when you fail to divide those two, the fact that most Muslims share our values and are are just like everyone else and are decent people.
But there
are some that aren't, and if you don't say that out loud, then you let them spread.
The unassailable fact is 90% of terror deaths since 2000 in this country have been committed by Islamists. 75% of terror threats are by Islamists. And until this government confronts that and actually deals with it, we're going to have a problem. And can I just also say, we have a government currently that is trying to pass a blasphemy law where you're not allowed to criticise Islam, a religion much of which totally contravenes our beliefs and our culture. And yet there may come a time where we're not allowed to criticise it. So what is that going to mean for Islamic terror?
I want to make a point. There's a picture behind us here in the studio of Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer looking very, very upset, laying the reeds. I mean, Sadiq Khan himself looks to be almost on the verge of tears, and maybe, you know, that's...
Sure he is.
That's genuine.
He's a Londoner born and bred.
OK, there you go. But then I have listed a couple of their legal back catalogues there now. And they, of course, say cab rank rule, they were just doing their job. Some of their clients might have made them feel very uncomfortable.
Exactly the same excuses as used at the Nuremberg trials, wasn't it? People who say that, you know, I was just doing my job, I was just doing what I had to do. I don't think that's acceptable. I'm a lawyer. First of all, the cab rank principle, I did a law degree, qualified as a lawyer, I worked as a lawyer. Certainly a new one on me, the idea that you have no choice other to represent people. It's new on me because it's not actually true.
But we
Keir Starmer should level with people. Maybe he decided it was the right thing to do to represent these people, but you do actually have a choice. This lie that they're perpetuating, saying, I literally had no choice. It is untrue.
No, Benjamin, is that unfair? You know, is it unfair of me to raise those things about their legal back catalogue? They say in no uncertain terms, look, it was a moment in time, it was their job, they didn't necessarily particularly want to do it, etc. You know, is it unfair of me to say that actually it's a bit annoying maybe for some people in the British public to see them laying reeds given who they've represented in the past at times?
Well, yeah, of course it is. I think it's incredibly demeaning. I mean, you know, the idea that people... I think it's essentially racist when people try to claim, as Lee Anderson did, that Sadiq Khan... Lee Anderson said he was controlled by Islamists.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that, by the way.
But that doesn't help anybody, and in their jobs they will have to sit down with people on the receiving end of these atrocities and listen to them. I'm sure that is why Sadiq Khan looked like he was crying when he was doing it. And
can we trust anything that both Khan and Starmer say when we know both of them are dependent on the Muslim vote to keep them in power? That to criticise Islam or Muslims in any way, shape or form is very damaging for them personally. Can we trust what they say?
Well, I mean, at the last election, Keir Starmer, who has a Jewish family, by the way, was explicit about his support for Israel, and he got lots of backlash. And so I don't think you can have it both ways. He was heavily criticised by the Muslim community, and he continued to stand by that point before the election. Okay. And actually, Labour's Muslim vote fell by 10% in the last election. So he stood up for it when he was at risk.
Yeah, I worry that firstly, the problem has got bigger, and I think it has got bigger, unquestionably, that we've allowed that problem to fester. There was a moment in time, there have been several moments in time since where we could maybe have drawn a line on the kind of hardcore Islamist element, not to talk about ordinary Muslims, but the Islamist element there. And that if something happens like that again, Jake, I don't think the public reaction is going to be, let's light a candle and say hate won't win and everything will just carry on and we won't let people divide us. I think it'll be a very different public reaction, Jake.
Let's make no bones about it, though. Muslims in this country, law-abiding, peace-loving Muslims, were as disgusted as every other person.
Some of them were probably killed. I mean, I can't remember the ethnicities of all of them, but I think they were.
I was involved, you know, I was there and involved in the Westminster Bridge attack. These are horrendous things in society. And so actually Keir Starmer is right when he says we shouldn't allow people to divide us. He's absolutely right. But he should also stand on the side of British public, whether they're Muslim, Christian or anything else, who say we cannot allow this to fester in our society.
Why couldn't they name what the attack was? It was a jihadi attack.
Today is a memory day. Every other day should be dealing with the problem.
Well, whatever happened to the war on terror that we were supposed to be waging? That just withered away. You know, that scheme Prevent, which was supposed to de-radicalise people, failed miserably. We haven't tackled the problems of 7/7.
Can I just say,
very quickly.
I was in Syria in February, the most beautiful country, and a young man I met there said, said, everyone will think we're all terrorists in Syria. We're not. The most victims of Islamic terrorism are other Muslims. We know just how tough it is.
OK, all right, well, there we go. Well, I'm very keen to see what people's views are at home or if you're listening on the radio, etc., about the response to it today and all of that. I'll stress again, you know, we've spoken there about, you know, some of the track record there of the Prime Minister and Sir Sadiq Khan as well. You know, again, there's no indication, obviously, that they are on the side of Islamists or anything like that, and it was part of their job in the legal profession. So there we go.